I'm Keith Olbermann, and this is The Resistance. So, new election? Our last one was influenced by a foreign power, likely coordinated with the victorious presidential campaign, influenced and likely coordinated, that is, barring the most extraordinary and unexpected vindication, one so sweeping that not even Trump's most ardent supporters have successfully hinted at it, let alone articulated it. So, new election? Obviously, it will be impossible ever to prove that Russian cyber warfare, an internationally managed disinformation campaign, targeted marketing that may have even been tied to hacked and stolen voter registration records, and maybe even laundered money, caused the 70,000 Americans who decided the Electoral College count to actually vote the way they did, and that they would not have voted otherwise. We cannot examine the brains of every voter in this country, and Lord knows that with the ones who voted for Trump, we wouldn't have much to examine anyway. But the mechanics of the interference, and let's call it what that was, a Russian act of war, a virtual invasion of the United States with the possible collaboration and support of Americans who would be, by legal definition, traitors to this country. The mechanics of how that war was successfully waged against our election and our freedoms and our way of life, that can be proved. So, new election? Not only are those who oppose Donald Trump getting closer to connecting every link in that chain, but each time he opens his mouth or his Twitter account about he was wiretapped and how his campaign was spied upon, he is also connecting every link in that chain. Humpty Dumpty over there is simply so focused on his unquenchable, existential need to make himself the victim that he has begun to resemble the proverbial defendant charged with killing his parents, who then complains he's being persecuted even though he's an orphan. So, new election? There's no philosophical construct in which, were the Russian conspiracy proved and Trump impeached and removed from office, that the Republican Party should be rewarded with continued control of the White House. The Republicans not only had ample opportunity to derail Trump's nomination and even his victory in the Electoral College, but he gave them a dozen reasons and opportunities to do the right thing. They did not do the right thing. To hell with them. So, new election? Well, we don't do it that way. We've had a presidential vote of some kind every fourth year since 1788. We have held a presidential election when nobody knew what the rules were and only 7 states had any popular voting. We have held a presidential election while the British were forming a blockade of our ports. We have held a presidential election in the middle of a civil war every 4 years. You want a new election, you will get it in 2020. And none of that is explicitly in the Constitution. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 6, in case of the removal of the president from office. It is amazingly vague. It was later clarified by the 25th Amendment, but the pertinent part is as vague today as when the framers wrote it. Quoting, in case of the removal of the president from office or of his death, resignation, or inability to discharge the powers and duties of the said office, the same shall devolve on the vice president, and the Congress may by law provide for the case of removal, death, resignation, or inability both of the president and vice president, declaring what officer shall then act as president, and such officer shall act accordingly until the disability be removed or a president shall be elected. Until the disability be removed or a president shall be elected, not until the term of the elected president shall elapse. The Constitution specifies that an elected president serves 4 years. In the scenario in which the elected president is out, it specifies nothing about how long the new president will serve. No every 4 years of an election, no serving out the term. That's just the custom. And in fact, the first time a president did not make it to the end of his term, when William Henry Harrison died after just 31 days in office in 1841, there were those who argued that the vice president, John Tyler, should act as caretaker-in-chief until a new election could be held. While this was being debated, Tyler simply had himself sworn in as president and basically told his opponents to try to do something about it. That, the Tyler precedent, as they call it, is the entirety of the reason that President Mike Pence would presumably finish Trump's term, or that President Paul Ryan would presumably finish Trump's term if Trump and Pence were swallowed up by the Russian scandal, or President Orrin Hatch, who's third in line, or President Rex Tillerson, who's fourth, or President Betsy DeVos, who's 15th. President Betsy DeVos. So, new election? A new presidential election before 2020 might be constitutional, though presumably politically impossible, because some legislation of some kind would have to be passed by the Senate or the House and presumably affirmed by the Supreme Court. And all three bodies, of course, would also have to be hit by lightning simultaneously to knock enough patriotism and morality into the Republicans who control them to get them to actually hold a 2017 or 2018 presidential election. However, this could still be opening Pandora's box, like turning off all the gravity, if we somehow were able to break the tradition, the Tyler precedent. The industry into which we have made politics and government in this country could conceivably start to generate a new presidential election every 6 months. Elect a president, swear him in, impeach him and his successors, pass legislation for another new election, lather, rinse, repeat. I mean, imagine what the Republicans would do with this. Well, of course, we already kind of know. If a Democratic president had been elected as part of a secret Russian war against this country, the Republicans would impeach that president and the vice president and everybody on the Democratic chain of succession and embrace the cry of new elections now rising from the streets. Wall Street and K Street specifically. Hell, in 1998, Newt Gingrich reportedly had dreams that he would impeach and remove Bill Clinton. Then President Al Gore would pardon Clinton, and then Gingrich could then impeach Gore for pardoning Clinton. That would have made the Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, president, instead of what he is now, a guy whose last presidential campaign defaulted on debts of $4,600,000. You missed the sunrise today because somebody put something in your drink last night. You can't go back in time to see it, and you can't declare there's going to be a second sunrise at 4 p.m. You have to wait. But you do not have to wait 3.5 years. So, new election? It would be unprecedented and dangerous, and unprecedented and dangerous is where we are now with this disloyal punk in the White House. Thus, to me, we should keep a new election on the table, despite the risk, and more obviously, despite the near impossibility that it would be politically. However, if you want a guaranteed new election to take the government out of the hands of these thugs, if you want, after Trump's removal, to keep our freedoms safe from the 14th in line to succeed him, that would be President Rick Perry, who would serve just before President Betsy DeVos. If you want a new election for sure, you have a bunch of them this November. I don't care if it's the 2 state governorships up for grabs in the fall, or the mayoralties in 21 different cities, or balloting for the head of whoever in your city government supervises the Visiting Nurse Association. Throw the Republicans who profited from this, and they have all profited from this, and they all knew who they signed on with. Throw them out and put their party out of business this fall and next year in the midterms. Concentrate on voting out every single Republican from the House and Senate in 2018. Run them into the ground. So, new election, that's your new election. Matter of fact, that's also your new sunrise. Resist. Peace.